When I first returned to Christianity after having been an atheist for a while, I believed that the resurrection happened, but there was a whole lot in the Bible that I didn't believe, and part of that was the Christmas stories. The reason for this is that they're not multiply attested, and they're not written as close in time to the events described as the other parts of the Gospels. Last year I looked at the Christmas star, and if you remember in those videos, I was surprised how much there was that was potentially historical, talking about what the wise men could have seen, where they could have come from, etc. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the killing of the infants in Bethlehem by Herod. I doubted the historicity of this at first, but have since changed my mind because I've seen so many analogies in the ancient world, and this has helped me to think that the likelihood of it having been historical is greater and greater than I used to. The biblical account gives us the following information. Herod gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. Immediately we should notice two things from this. He was killing anyone 2 years old and younger, in accordance with the time he learned from the Magi. This means the Magi had seen whatever they saw a year or more before they traveled. I cover this more in my video on the Christmas star, but all this to say the nativity scenes with Jesus in a manger and the wise men showing up together at the same time doesn't seem accurate. He's probably a toddler by the time the wise men show up. The other thing to notice is a king who is willing to kill young boys because of a portent or omen in the sky. Would a king really order babies killed just because of an interpretation from a wise man? The only way to solve this would be to see other stories that are similar. Just like Herod, we're going to see one from the Roman Senate. They also attempted to make a declaration to kill the little baby boys within an area at Rome because of signs pointing to a coming king. Quote, having reached this point, it will not be out of place to add an account of the omens which occurred before he, and the he he's talking about is Augustus, Caesar Augustus, was born. End quote for now. Suetonius is about to tell us what happened in the night sky when Augustus was born. Quote, on the very day of his birth and afterwards, from which it was possible to anticipate and perceive his future greatness and uninterrupted good fortune in ancient days, when a part of the wall of Villatre had been struck by lightning, the prediction was made that a citizen of that town would one day rule the world. Through the confidence in this, the people of Villatre had at once made a war on the Roman people and fought with, after that, almost to their utter destruction. But at long last, afterward, the event proved that the omen had foretold the rule of Augustus. This is according to Julius Maranthus. I'll pause here to say that Suetonius' source is Julius Maranthus, and that was Augustus' free man. So this is a guy who worked as a servant for Augustus. He knew him personally. He would be a primary source. Admittedly, Suetonius is a secondary source, but he is talking to a primary source when he gets the story. He's close in time to the event described, and this is what Julius Maranthus says about the birth of Augustus. Quote, a few months before Augustus was born, a portent was greatly observed at Rome, which gave warning that nature was pregnant with a king for the Roman people. Thereupon, the Senate in consternation, and then I'm going to interrupt him and say, this word consternation, exteritum, brings to mind like the passage from Matthew 2 when you read about Herod's reaction to what the wise men are telling him. The wise men tell him they've seen the sign of a king in the sky, and then it says, Accusos decho basileus Herodes etarachthei kai passa Hierosoluma. And you see the etarachthei is, he was terrified. So when these kings hear these portents of another coming king, their reaction is terror, both with the Roman Senate in this passage from Suetonius and in the Bible when Herod hears about the sign the Magi see. This fear is what compelled Herod to his killing, and also what compels the Senate to do the following actions. I'm going to go back to Suetonius now. Quote, the Senate decreed that no male child born that year should be reared, and those whose wives were with child saw to it that the decree was not filed in the treasury, since each one appropriated the prediction to his own family. End quote. So here we see it was predicted that a king would come at this time period, and so the Senate declared that they should kill all the babies, but the mothers kept it from happening because each of them was hoping that their own kid would be the coming king. Later, Suetonius recounts to us the following story. Quote, when in retirement in Apollonia, Augustus mounted with Agrippa to the studio of the astrologer Theognis. Agrippa was the first to try his fortune, and when a great and almost incredible career was predicted for him, Augustus persisted in concealing the time of his birth and in refusing to disclose it through diffidence and fear that he may be found to be less eminent. When he at last gave it unwillingly and hesitatingly, and only after urgent request, Theognis sprang up and threw himself at his feet. From that time on, Augustus had such faith in his destiny that he made his horoscope public and issued a silver coin stamped with the sign of the constellation Capricornus under which he was born." End quote. His successor, Tiberius, we read, in his infancy the astrologer Scribonius promised him an illustrious career and even that he would one day be king, but without the crown of royalty. For at that time the course of rule of the Caesars was as yet unheard of, right? So that's later on. Tiberius is told he's going to be king, but without all the paraphernalia of a king. We see even more of this astrological talk talking about Nero, and in this context it's more negative. Nero, we read, quote, "Nero was born at Antium 9 months after the death of Tiberius on the 18th day before the calends of January. Just as the sun rose so that he was touched by its rays almost before he could be laid upon the ground. Many people at once made many direful predictions from his horoscope, and a remark of his father Domitius was also regarded as an omen. For while receiving the congratulations of his friends, he said, nothing that was not abominable and a public bane could be borne to Agrippa and himself." So you can see that there's a connection between astronomical signs and kings. That's well attested both before and after Christ. So the idea of kings killing children because of a portent or sign isn't just found with the Roman Senate, but elsewhere in the ancient world as well. Next, we're going to be going further back in time. We're going to look at Herodotus' story of the Persians, and specifically Cyrus the Great story.